So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the FIRE movement. FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retiring Early. Now, I'm going to assume if you're watching this video, you're probably aware of what FIRE is. You're probably somewhat interested in it. Maybe it's a concept you're exploring, or probably more than likely you consider yourself FIRE, or you're working towards FIRE. So for anybody who isn't familiar, I will drop kind of a good little CNBC piece, a little 3-minute video that kind of explains what FIRE is. I'll drop that in the description box below, as well as I will put a card above, just to give a really brief synopsis, pretty self-explanatory. Financial independence, retiring early. It's really all about increasing your income, lowering your expenses, increasing your savings rate, doing smart things with your money so that it compounds, so that you can retire at a young age, and you're not 65, 70, 80 years old when you finally have some money and are able to retire and travel or work on hobbies, pursue passions, all those types of things. Now, what I really kind of wanted to talk about in this video is the FIRE community kind of creating a lot of problems out of thin air. And kind of creating a lot of imaginary problems. So some common things I see, and I'm pretty active in like there's a financial independence retiring early subreddit. There's a lean FIRE subreddit, which lean FIRE is FIRE, but it's people who are putting a little bit more of a focus on being frugal. And a lot of the people in lean FIRE, kind of the reason that they've kind of gathered together as a community is they say in the financial independence retiring early community, pretty much everybody in that forum, and I wouldn't say everybody, but this is what some people seem to think. Everybody in that forum has a really high income, right? So people are working in Silicon Valley, or they're doctors or attorneys or engineers, and they're all making, 150,000 a year, 200,000 a year, 300,000 a year. And a lot of the people in the lean FIRE community, they're having to do FIRE a little bit differently. Their incomes aren't as high, so they're having to focus a little bit more on frugality and savings. They're having to pick up a second job or drive Uber, or do some type of side hustle, work weekends, work as a waiter outside their job. They're doing some, they're handling their FIRE journey a little bit differently. But anyhow, across all, and then you have fat FIRE, which is people who want to FIRE, as ballers essentially. So one kind of common theme that I'm seeing a lot is people kind of creating problems for themselves out of thin air. Now, I remember seeing a post a few days back, and somebody was like, what do you tell people that you do when you're out at a party? Because like I'm out at parties and people say, what do you do? And I don't know what to tell them. And I tell them I'm retired. And, they ask me a bunch of questions about it. And it's weird and it's awkward. Now, here's something to keep in mind. I saw a great meme the other day, and the meme was something along the lines of, it said, nobody gives a shit. And there was one guy there was like a stick figure who was really sad about that. And then there was another guy that said, nobody gives a shit. And he was like jumping up and down, pumping his hands in the air. And it really depends on kind of how you look at things. But that's the reality, is really, besides the people very close to you, nobody gives a shit about you. When you are with somebody in an elevator, pass somebody on the street, go by a coworker in the morning, and they say, how you doing? And you say, good, how about you? They don't care how you're doing, and you're not giving them an honest answer to how you're doing. It's just kind of one of those, social, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Just one of those kind of normal little social interactions that we have that really aren't very deep and don't really serve a purpose. So in terms of people like getting their panties in a bunch about people asking them questions at a party, well, here's the reality. First off, if you're retired, if you fired and you're under 50 years old, it's not normal. That's not to say it's bad, but you're not the norm, right? Most people are working till 60, 65, 70, if not longer. So if you're retired under the age of 50, and I would say the younger that you retire, the more odd it's going to be. If you retire at 40, it's even more rare. If you retire at 30, it's even more rare. If you retire at 27, it's even more rare. Well, anytime something is outside of the norm, it's going to pique people's curiosities. So if you're 32 years old and you're at a party making small talk and you tell somebody you're retired, well, they probably don't know too many other 32-year-old retired people. So they might ask you, what did you do for a career? How did you manage to do that? Now, most people are probably either just curious, or maybe they want to pick up something from you. Success leaves clues. When I see somebody doing well, a lot of times I want to know, what'd you do? How'd you get there? What's the secret? So, I don't know, maybe you feel weird being put on the spot or having people ask you questions, but first off, yeah, it's going to draw attention if you're retired under 40 years old. And two, people are probably going to be curious about it. They may say, what would you do for a career? What do you do with your days? They're not looking down on you. They're not, they're simply just curious. They're asking, and some of them might be interested in kind of how they can implement some similar things into their life that you have done so that they can maybe retire at an earlier age too, or maybe they're looking to check out of the rat race. Here's the other thing about that. When somebody at a party asks you what you do, they don't give a shit. They're making small talk. It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. If you're in a conversation with somebody and you don't know what to say, or if you're in a conversation with somebody new, you're pretty much always, where you live, where'd you grow up, how about that weather, what do you do for a living? There's these 2, 3, 4 kind of knee-jerk questions that we tend to ask. So if somebody asks you what you do and you truly don't want to share, or you're not interested in getting into a conversation about it, say something vague. Say something like, I'm in consulting. Most people aren't going to give a shit. The conversation is not going to go any deeper than that. If whatever your former career was, if you're at a party and someone says, what do you do? And you used to work in online marketing, say, oh, I'm in online marketing. You're not lying. That's what you used to do. They really don't give a shit what you do. If you're really trying to avoid the conversation, just use one of those strategies. Now, what I think is, I tend to notice people like to humble brag, right? So I come from the world of entrepreneurship and e-commerce and things like that, and I see similar kind of circle jerk subjects come up in e-commerce communities, like, well, when you're out, like, what do you tell people that you do? Like, I do a lot of different things. I have an e-commerce business and a digital marketing, and like, how do I explain to people what I do? And really, it's just kind of a humble brag. I think even with kind of the FIRE movement stuff, it's kind of like people are proud of their accomplishment. Like, it took a lot of sacrifice. Hats off to them, props to them. But people almost kind of want to humble brag, like, oh, I have so much money, I don't have to work. But then they don't want to deal with kind of the fallout or deal with the conversation that comes to that. So if you don't truly want to deal with that conversation, like I said, either say what your past career was or say that you're in consulting. Another one that came up just today that I was reading is some guy got into some big long, when I say circle jerk, I just kind of, I'm not trying to be derogatory or insulting to people, and I'm not even trying to insult people who ask these questions, but when I talk about circle jerk, it's kind of like discussions just for the sake of having discussion. There's really not a reason to be kind of discussing these topics or even really be worried about whatever the subject matter is. But this guy was like, how do you date? The guy said, I just recently barista fired. When barista fire, I know that we're throwing a lot of acronyms and a lot of new words for anybody who's new here, but barista fire is essentially somebody who leaves like a full-time, maybe stressful, very intensive job to go get kind of a casual part-time job. So a lot of times barista fire kind of became popular because Starbucks offers benefits to part-time employees. So somebody could kind of scale down, take on a lower stress job as a barista, and they could still get health benefits. They could get out of the house. They could make a little bit of money. So barista fire has been kind of this catch-all for really just kind of a full-timer going down to part-time work. There's another kind of movement or another kind of sub-unit of the FIRE movement called Coast Fire. And Coast Fire is people who their money, they have enough money to where their investments are going to compound to be enough for their retirement, but not if they lived off them for the next 30 years. So somebody who's, say, 30 years old and has, I don't know, we'll say 300,000 in the bank or something like that. Like, if they put that money into investments and just let it do its thing for the next 30 years until they're at retirement age, they're good. They don't really need to earn more money for retirement, but they don't have enough money to where they can live the next 30 years to retirement off that money, draining it, and still have enough money for retirement. So this gentleman said he started a job at Starbucks, and he's like, how do I, how's dating going to be? How do I explain to women what I'm doing? And I thought, you realize that there's people who, you're very fortunate through, I'm sure, hard work and sacrifice, but you're very fortunate in that you don't have to work a high stress job. You don't necessarily have to work for the money. You're working as a barista and you got some money in the bank. At the end of the day, you're not really any different than, there's plenty of guys out there, or plenty of guys and gals out there who that's what they do, right? They need the money. They work as a barista. That's their full-time job. And these people still live normal lives, right? They still date. They still get married. So, like, how are you any different than them? And after kind of talking to this guy, what it really seemed to come down to was almost more of a class issue, where I kind of got the vibe that, like, he didn't want to date a woman who would date a Starbucks barista. And it's kind of like that funny thing that some guys have where, I don't know if you want to say it's all in a chase. As soon as they get a woman, there's some people who, they strive to get a woman or to win over a woman. And then as soon as they have her, whether it be because of low self-confidence or whatever else, they're like, well, I don't, I don't want a woman who would date me. Any woman who would date me isn't a very, isn't a catch. And it's kind of one of those silly things like that. But I kind of got the impression that this gentleman didn't want to date or enter into a relationship with somebody who would date a Starbucks barista. And it was almost like he was kind of trying to wrap his head around, I don't really want to tell women that I have all this money and I'm really financially secure, but I also don't want to date a woman who would date a Starbucks barista, almost like it's a class thing or they would be below him. But that's another thing. And, not every relationship, not every date you go on is going to lead to marriage. Part of dating is just fun and meeting new people. And, maybe some people wind up as romantic partners. Maybe some people wind up as good friends. But you kind of learn what you're looking for in a relationship, what you're not looking for. You kind of grow as a person yourself, maybe learn about yourself a little bit more. You're working as a barista, so what? It's not really an issue. There's plenty of people out there who are baristas that date. And then somebody else in this same thread had said something like, well, yeah, like, I'm having the same concerns. And somebody was like, well, what do you do? What's your lifestyle like? And he was like, well, I trade stocks and I manage a couple Airbnb properties that I own. And I'm a property manager and I do this. And for that guy, it was like even more ridiculous. It's like, dude, you got like either 5 jobs or 5 side hustles. Like, I'm sure you keep yourself busy. You have a couple things going on. You're working, you're making money. Like, how is this an issue at all? Like, you really need to explain to a woman that, well, here's what one part of my income is, and here's what another part of my income is. If you're just casually dating a woman, if you're just casually grabbing drinks, probably not going to come up that much at all. You may have that initial, we don't really have anything to say to each other, so where are you from? What do you do? I do real estate. I manage some Airbnbs. The conversation's really probably not going to go much deeper than that unless they say something like, oh, I love Airbnb. I stay at a lot of Airbnbs. Where are your properties at? But really the conversation probably isn't going to go much deeper than that. I guess kind of the point I'm getting at here is, when you kind of have these questions, think, is this a legitimate problem or am I just kind of humble bragging? And also just kind of realize that, for the most part, casual interactions with people really don't give a shit about your life or what you do or the details of your life. So, I wouldn't consider it lying to, like I said, earlier, if you're at a party and someone asks what you do and you're retired, but you used to work in something, I really wouldn't consider it lying to say, well, I work in software sales, even though maybe you worked in software sales 3 years ago and you're not doing it anymore. I would liken that to the same thing as when someone says, how are you doing this morning? And you had a shitty day, right? You had a fight with your wife, you were late dropping your kid off at school, you took a really nasty poop and you didn't wipe that good. You're not going to tell somebody who asks you how your day is going about all those things. You're just going to say okay or good and move on. And I would liken the kind of career discussions to kind of that same thing. So let me know if you guys notice this at all. Are people in the FIRE world, the FIRE community, kind of creating problems that don't exist? Is this humble bragging? Or do you have some of these very, very same concerns? Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to kind of see more videos or hear more videos kind of about FIRE and the FIRE movement and kind of aspects to the FIRE lifestyle, feel free to drop a comment. Let me know, and I'll try to make some more of these. And, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you on the next one.